Hello, I'm going to solve the following word problem about interest. John inherited $25,000 and invested part of it in a money market account, part of it in bonds, and part in a mutual fund. After 1 year, he received a total of $16.20 in simple interest from these three investments. The money market account paid 6% annually, and the bonds paid 7% annually, and the mutual funds paid 8%. There was $6,000 more invested in bonds than mutual funds. Find the amount John invested in each. And you might think that this seems a very challenging problem, but if you actually use the formula I equals PRT, which is one of the three standard formulas we used with the word problems, and where I is the interest, P is the principal, R is the rate, and T is the time. The other two formulas, if you remember, were distance equals rate times time, the distance formula, or the mixture formula, P equals RW, the part and the rate and the whole. So if you look back at the last chapter, section 4.2, you will see those. Anytime we have a word problem using one of these formulas, there's just too many quantities going on. I like to make a chart. So let's go ahead and do that. When I make my chart, I usually save the last column, in this case the interest, for the letter, the variable that is a loan. It doesn't matter the order, the PRT, and then I label the three accounts. In this problem we had three: the money market, the bonds, and the mutual funds. And I try to fill out the first three columns only. So let's start with the rates, this middle column, because they tell you that the money market paid 6%. So I'm just going to put 0.06, the decimal representation of 6%. The bonds paid 7%. And finally, the mutual fund, 8%. The second column I'm going to do is the time, because that says after 1 year. So we know the times in all three are 1. The principals, those are our knowns. Those are what they are asking for. Find the amount invested. And principal is the amount that you invest, that you put into an account originally. So that's exactly what they're asking. Those are unknowns. So we have three of them. There's an X and a Y and a Z. So somehow, since we have three unknowns, we're going to have to find three equations. Finally, how do I fill out the last column is I save that to the end for the formula. So we know the formula I equals PRT. So what I'm going to do is multiply each row across, because the principal times the rate times the time. So we have 0.06 times X. The next row we have 0.07 times Y, and finally 0.08 Z. So now I have an expression for all the principals and all the interests. Now I'm ready to find my three equations. So the first number here is he inherited $25,000 and invested. So that is a principal. So that's why I use this column. And if I add all those three amounts together, we know it's going to be $25,000. The second number I have here that I have not used is the 1620. That's the amount of simple interest. So that would be this column. And if I add all those interest expressions up, I know I end up with 1620. The third equation uses the last sentence here. There is 6,000 more invested. That goes back to principal. So if I'm going to go back to this column, and we know that there was 6,000 more invested in bonds. So bonds, we know the amount invested was Y, and that is 6,000 more than what? Mutual funds. Mutual funds is Z. So now I have my three equations. The next thing we're going to do is solve. To solve this, I need to do two things. First, I need to get rid of the decimals, because to solve a 3 by 3 with decimals using elimination becomes very challenging. So what I would like to do is multiply the third equation, both sides, by 100 to get a 6x plus 7y plus 8z equals 162,000. That's what that turns into. The next thing I need to do is align these all three up. The first two looks like they're going to align properly, but the first and the third are going to align properly, but that second equation, that one is going to be a bit more challenging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract z from both sides and rewrite this as with the y first, then a z, then a 6,000. So now rewriting all three equations, we get the following. So we're going to solve this by elimination. To solve a 3 by 3, three equations with three unknowns by elimination, what we would like to do is reduce it to a 2 by 2, which means two equations and two unknowns. I notice the second equation in there has no x. So I would like to get another equation that has no x. So I think the easiest thing to do is to eliminate the x. You could choose to eliminate the y or the z. That would work just as easy. If you eliminate the z, for instance, you would have to do it twice, eliminating z in the first two and maybe eliminating z in the last two and get a 2 by 2 that way. But I'm going to choose eliminating the x. So let me just rewrite those two. To eliminate x, I know I have to multiply the first equation by a negative 6. Multiply both sides by a negative 6. And what I'll end up with is for the first one, distributive property, negative 6x minus 6y minus 6z equals negative 150,000. The second equation I'll leave alone. And if I add those up, just like we did with the previous problems, I notice the x's get eliminated, and what I'll have left with is y plus 2z equals 12,000. And I'm going to call that my fourth equation. Now, if I take my second equation and my fourth equation, I notice I have two equations that only have y and z. So that's what I'm going to do next. And I'm going to start over. I now have a 2 by 2, so I can go and eliminate anything I want. So I'm going to choose y. You can choose z just as easy, but I'm going to go ahead and eliminate y. So to do this, I'm going to multiply maybe the top equation by negative 1, both sides, to get a negative y plus z equals negative, because you have to do both sides, 6,000. Rewriting the second equation, adding those together, you get, the y's get eliminated, 3z equals 6,000, or z equals 2,000. I just found one of my knowns. That's a dollar amount, so I added that. To find another variable, the easiest one to find is one of these middle equations to find a y, because it's already missing the x. So I'm going to pick one of those. I'll pick maybe equation 2. You can do 4 just as easy. To get y minus 2,000 equals 6,000, or y is equal to, add 2,000 both sides, 8,000. Finally, to get x, I'm going to use one of my original equations. So maybe number 1. That looks nice and easy. To get, we don't know what x is, but we know y is 8,000 and z is 2,000, which adds to 10,000 on the right side there, left side. And to solve for x, we are going to subtract 10,000 from both sides, and we are going to get 15,000. So now we have the x, we have the y, and we have the z. That solves our system, and we can see that x, that's the amount of money. The x is the amount of money that we put in money market. Y is the amount that we put in bonds from our chart, and z is the amount that we put in the mutual funds. So now we have the solution. And that is it.